buddy of mine in Columbus, Ohio, drives a 2018 Honda Civic, 1.5-liter turbo CVT, everyday commuter. His daily run is from Westerville to downtown, about 15 miles each way, mostly stop and go with a stretch of interstate. Standard commute for millions of people in the country. I drive the same car, same year, same 1.5T, same CVT. Used to live near him, moved a few states over, but the vehicles and the route types are effectively identical. Over the past 3 years of comparing notes, one thing keeps coming up. His average is 34 miles per gallon. Mine is 27. Same car, same driving type, same fuel. Difference is about 7 miles per gallon. Doesn't sound like much. On his annual mileage of about 15,000 though, it's $600 to $800 a year in gas at current prices. 10 years, call it $7,500. 20 years of ownership on a well-cared-for Civic, up to $15,000 in gas spending, purely from how the same engine is being asked to run. I chalked it up to driving style for a long time. He's about a decade older, calmer, more measured. That's directionally right, but pretty vague. 8 months ago, I rode along with him for a week. Took notes on every acceleration, every brake application, every reach for the AC dial. Then I ran the same route in my own car for a week, doing what he did. Over the following 8 months, my Civic went from 27 to about 30 miles per gallon on a rolling average. Not quite his 34, but close. Roughly an 11% MPG gain from 7 behavior changes. Small caveat, honest one. The gap between my 30 and his 34 is another 13%, and it's not technique, it's experience. Experience only comes with time. The specific skill of reading traffic and anticipating stops takes most drivers 12 to 18 months of steady practice to internalize. Going from 27 to 34 overnight isn't realistic. Going from 27 to 30 over a couple of months, though, that's available to anyone. In this video, all 7 habits. For each, what to do specifically, the physics behind it, what the realistic MPG gain actually is, and where the standard version of the advice online overstates the number. Because cut fuel bill 30% is a great thumbnail promise and not what the average driver actually gets. Realistic total across all 7 combined is about 15 to 25%, depending on how bad your baseline habits were. At the end, a 30-day experiment you can start tonight and measure yourself. Counting down from 7 to 1. Habit number 7, weight and aerodynamics. Open your trunk and look at what's in there. For most people, it's a tool set from a repair a year ago, a jug of coolant just in case, a folding chair, a bag of winter gear that never got moved back to the garage in spring, a case of bottled water. The average driver hauls 100 to 150 pounds of useful clutter around at all times. Simple physics. Every 100 pounds of extra weight in city driving costs roughly 1% in fuel economy. Small, but constant. 150 pounds is about 1.5% forever, every day, every year. Over 10 years of ownership, that's several $100s in gas. Not millions, but real money. Separate matter, a roof rack. Now you're not talking about weight, you're talking about aerodynamics. An empty crossbar setup adds about 5% to fuel burn at 65 miles per hour. An empty enclosed cargo box adds 10 to 12%. An open rack with luggage tied to it adds up to 20%. This isn't blogger folklore. It's measured on dyno stands, published in SAE J1263 and J2263 Coast Down Test Standards. Real number. Physically, aerodynamic drag force scales with the square of speed. Going from 30 miles per hour to 60 miles per hour, drag force quadruples. The power the engine has to produce to overcome it scales with the cube of speed. Going from 30 to 60, power required goes up 8 times. A roof rack adds 15 to 30% to that drag force, depending on the shape. Every minute it's on the roof, that penalty is running. What to do? Once a month, clean out the trunk of everything that isn't needed for the current season. Keep only a basic emergency kit, jack, spare, road triangle, first aid, small tool roll. Everything else goes to the garage or the basement. Roof rack. Take it off after each use if you don't need it again in the next couple days. Simple rule. If this Saturday it's not going to the campsite, it comes off Friday night. Realistic savings from this habit, 1 to 4% MPG. My buddy in Columbus keeps his trunk clean, jack, spare, small tool bag. Mine used to have a subwoofer, coolant jug, an old jump seat, and 2 jackets. First week of driving with all of that out, measurable 0.3 miles per gallon improvement on the same commute. One separate winter note. If you drive an SUV or a pickup and keep sandbags in the bed for winter traction, a reasonable habit in the north for two-wheel drive rear-wheel vehicles, less useful on modern 4WD trucks. Those bags are typically 200 to 300 pounds. That's a real 2 to 3% fuel penalty for the whole winter. Worth doing if you actually need the traction. Not worth doing just because Dad always did it if your truck is 4WD with electronic stability control. On a modern 4WD truck, the bags do more for your gas bill than they do for your traction. Habit number 6. Tire pressure at every fill-up. Not once a month. Not when I get around to the tire shop. At every fill-up. Simple rule. Pull up to the pump while gas is flowing, grab the pressure gauge from the glove box, and check all 4 corners. Why it works. A tire with low pressure deforms more at every rotation. Each turn of the wheel dumps more energy into deforming the rubber and heating it up. That's rolling resistance. On most passenger cars, the door jamb spec is somewhere in the 32 to 35 pounds per square inch range cold. Every 3 pounds per square inch under spec costs about 1% in fuel economy. Run all 4 tires at 26 pounds per square inch instead of 32, and you're bleeding 6 to 7% forever. Plus tire wear. An underinflated tire wears at the edges and skimps the center. You lose maybe a quarter or a third of tire life. A set of decent all-seasons at $600 that should be lasting 45,000 miles gets replaced at 30,000. That's real money on top of the fuel penalty. What to do? A basic digital tire gauge is $15 at any parts store. Lives in the glove box. Every fill-up, you check. Below spec, pump it up at the station's air pump. Many stations have free air. Some charge $1. 2 minutes. In half a year, the habit is automatic, and you don't think about it. One correction. The spec depends on load. Driving solo with a light trunk, standard spec. Full family plus luggage on a summer road trip, spec goes up 3 to 5 pounds per square inch. The exact number is on the door jamb sticker in a table format, 1 row per load configuration. Most drivers have never read this sticker. It's right there. Note on TPMS. tire pressure monitoring system has been mandatory on new U.S. cars since 2007. It only warns you when pressure drops to about 25% below cold spec. Everything above that threshold, but below spec, TPMS shows nothing, which means the light can be off and you can be running 5 to 7% worse than optimal, and you'd never know. TPMS is for safety, not for economy. For economy, you need the physical gauge. One more piece: temperature. For every 10-degree Fahrenheit drop in ambient temperature, tire pressure drops about 1 pound per square inch. Fall, when temps go from 70 to 40 over a couple of weeks, all 4 tires lose 3 pounds per square inch despite being physically fine. Which is exactly why with the first cold snap of fall, you recheck all 4 tires with a gauge, not eyeball them. 2 more quick details worth knowing. First, the door jamb spec is a cold spec. That means measured before you drive, with the tires the same temperature as ambient. If you drove 10 miles to the gas station, the tires warmed up 5 to 8 degrees Fahrenheit from rolling friction and pavement heat, and the gauge will read 2 to 3 pounds per square inch high. That's normal. It just means target 32 pounds per square inch cold, and the gas station gauge showing 34 hot means you're on target, not over. Second, tire wear itself. As tires wear from full tread down to legal limit, the volume inside the tire actually gets slightly smaller, so the same air load reads a hair higher on the gauge. Small effect, worth knowing on tires with more than 30,000 miles on them. Realistic savings, 2 to 4%, plus tire life, plus better handling and shorter stopping distances. Combined value from all effects is the biggest $0 payback on this whole list. Habit number 5, the AC, done strategically. Summer, 95 degrees. Car's been sitting in the sun for 3 hours. Inside the cabin is 130 degrees. Reflex, jump in, crank AC to max, close all windows. Least efficient way to cool the cabin. Reason: the interior has absorbed enormous amounts of heat over 3 hours. Walls, upholstery, dash, seat leather, glass. Everything is radiating hot air. The AC system fights that huge thermal mass and hot interior at the same time, running the compressor at max, and the compressor pulls power off the engine through a belt, adding to fuel burn. Works better. First 2 or 3 minutes after starting up, roll all windows down and drive. Use normal airflow to blow the trapped heat out of the cabin. Temperature falls from 130 to about 90 by natural convection alone. Then close the windows and turn on the AC, but not on max, middle setting. Now the AC is working on 90-degree air instead of 130. And it catches up easily. Second trick. 2 to 3 minutes before you get to your destination, turn off the compressor button. AC, not the whole climate system. Leave the fan on. Keep driving. The cabin keeps getting cool air off the evaporator, which built up a significant cold reserve during the drive. The compressor isn't pulling engine power at all. Feels the same. Saves noticeable fuel over the last leg of every trip. One clarification: don't be scared of AC. It doesn't burn gas like crazy. Running consumption is 5 to 15% of total burn, depending on ambient temp and mode. Strategic use of it drops that to 5 to 7%. Fully skipping it is a bad idea. Driving with the window down at 65 miles per hour on the interstate in 95-degree heat gives you roughly comparable drag penalty from the open window. and you're sweating anyway. On newer cars, from about 2018 forward, some manufacturers, Toyota, Hyundai, Kia, part of the VW range, put electric AC compressors on their mild hybrid trims. Those don't have a belt drive from the engine and work off a 48-volt system. They pull noticeably less, and the shut-off before arrival trick still helps, but the effect is smaller, a point or so, not 3 to 4. One more thing. Auto climate control at 72 to 74 degrees in auto mode is engineered to hit the sweet spot of comfort at minimum consumption. Manual on max fan and coldest setting almost always costs more. On most current Camrys, Civics, and modern Fords, auto at 72 is basically the factory-tuned economy setting. Realistic savings, 2 to 5% in summer. Doesn't apply in winter because the AC isn't running much. Habit number 4. Optimal speed and the Aero Cube. We touched on this in Habit 7. Drag force scales with velocity squared, and power required scales with velocity cubed. Let's put a number on it. For most modern passenger cars, the sweet spot for fuel economy is 55 to 60 miles per hour. In that range, the engine is at a favorable BSFC point. The transmission is in its top gear. Aerodynamic load is moderate, and the drivetrain is at its most efficient part-load region. What happens above 60? At 70 miles per hour, aerodynamic power demand is 1.6 times what it was at 60. At 80 miles per hour, it's 2.4 times, which means going from 60 to 80 burns roughly 60% more fuel per unit of time. Over a 200-mile trip, you save 20 minutes on the road, and you spend a third more on gas to do it. Trade your call. If you're on vacation and time isn't the thing, hold 60 on the freeway, save 30% on the highway portion of your fuel burn. If you're rushed, calculate where your time value beats the fuel cost. One more note on CD times A, coefficient of drag times frontal area, the aerodynamicist term for the size of the wall of air the car pushes. A slippery current Camry has a CD around 0.28. A larger crossover like the RAV4 is around 0.35. Frontal area adds another 15 to 20% for the crossover. Result? The RAV4 spends about 25% more fuel on aero alone at the same speed as the Camry. Not because the engine is thirstier, because the body is physically bigger and less aero. This is another reason a sedan beats a crossover on long highway commutes with the same engine. Not the engine is greedy, the shape is. Crosswinds change the equation on long trips too. Coming out of Denver east on I-70 or across the Nebraska plains, a steady 20-mile-per-hour crosswind adds another 5 to 8% to fuel burn because the airflow around the car isn't clean. It's coming in at an angle. Drag coefficient effectively goes up, and the tires are working harder to hold a straight line. Not much you can do about it on a windy day except accept the cost. But it's worth knowing that a 22 miles per gallon day when the wind is howling isn't your driving getting worse, it's the weather. For downsized turbo engines, 1.4 TSI, Ford 1.5 EcoBoost, BMW N 202.0, there's an additional wrinkle. They're most efficient in a narrow 2,000 to 2,500 RPM band. Above that, they leave peak BSFC. Below that, they lose torque and need more throttle for the same power, which burns more. Top gear at 60 miles per hour is native for these engines. What to do? Freeway, cruise 60. Push to 65 if you must. If you really must, 70. Every step above 70 is exponential in fuel penalty. Cruise control is your friend for consistency. A basic electronic cruise, been standard on most cars since about 2010, holds speed better than your right foot and doesn't chase the guy who just passed you. Realistic savings, up to 15% on long highway trips. If you typically drive 75 to 80 and drop to 60 to 65. Habit number 3, proper acceleration. And the crawl myth. Online, there's a persistent myth. Slow, gentle granny acceleration saves fuel. Generations of drivers have been raised on it. Reality is more complicated. At very slow acceleration, the engine sits in inefficient territory for a long time. Low gear under load, small speed gain. It stays around 2,000 revolutions per minute for many seconds. Each of those seconds burns fuel without progress. Plus, you're in first, second, third gear longer, where drivetrain losses are higher. Better approach. Acceleration should be confident, not pedal to the floor, but not creeping either. Goal: get the engine up to 2,000 to 2,500 RPM quickly. Shift to the next gear, do it again, and be in top gear for the target cruising speed as fast as possible. Usually that's 4th, 5th, or 6th gear, depending on the transmission, cruising at 50 to 65 miles per hour. Why this is more economical? The engine spends minimum time under load in low gears, maximum time at top gear under light load, which for a gasoline engine is close to peak efficiency. Total fuel used for acceleration plus subsequent driving turns out lower than at slow crawl. There's a specific engine physics reason this is more counterintuitive on modern turbocharged cars. A downsized turbo, 1.5 EcoBoost, 1.5 T Civic, 2.0 Turbo Camry, VW 1.4 TSI, makes most of its efficiency at moderate load in the 2,000 to 2,500 RPM range, under partial boost. At very low load, the granny acceleration regime, the turbo isn't spinning up, direct injection dose is small, and the engine actually runs a slightly less efficient combustion than at moderate load. What you gain by driving gently at low RPM, you partly give back by running the engine off its efficiency peak. On a 2010 vintage naturally aspirated 2.5, the slow acceleration saves fuel rule was closer to correct. On a 2018 downsized turbo, moderate confident acceleration to top gear is genuinely more economical. On automatics, the electronics do the shifting, but they respond to pedal position. Light pedal held long, the transmission goes to eco program, shifts early, keeps RPM low. Close to optimal. Sharp pedal to half throttle. The transmission delays shifts, RPM climbs, fuel burn climbs. Pedal to the floor. Transmission enters sport mode, revs to 5,000, worst case. Sweet spot for an automatic is a smooth press to about a third of pedal travel. The transmission will do the rest and shift you into the economy program. Manuals get a different rule. You choose when to shift. The target is the moment the engine pulls solidly without straining. For a naturally aspirated engine, that's around 2,000 revolutions per minute. First gear to 2,000, shift to second, second to 2,000, third, and so on to top. After the shift, don't lug the engine below 1,500 under load. That pushes the engine into detonation-prone territory and burns more fuel for the same power. Keep it in the 1,500 to 2,500 range as your working band. One more note on the clutch. If you drive a manual and you never learned smooth clutch and throttle coordination, it's the biggest single hit to your fuel economy. Jerky launches, clutch abuse, tire chirp, all of that eats gas and eats parts. One weekend of practicing on an empty parking lot fixes it for life. This alone is a couple miles per gallon for a lot of manual drivers. Realistic savings, 3 to 7% in dense city driving with lots of stoplight to stoplight acceleration. Habit number 2, engine braking and DFCO. Deceleration, fuel cutoff. Cutting fuel when the engine is being spun by momentum, not driven by throttle. It's a function present on every fuel-injected car since the mid-90s. Almost nobody outside mechanic circles knows about it. It gives the biggest single MPG bump on this whole list. Here's how it works. You're doing, say, 40 miles per hour in town. Red light 200 yards ahead. You lift completely off the throttle. Transmission is in 5th or 4th. Engine is at 1,500 to 1,800 revolutions per minute. The ECU does one specific thing in that moment. It fully cuts fuel injection. The engine keeps spinning because the wheels are still driving it through the transmission, but zero gasoline is flowing. Instant zero on the trip computer's instantaneous MPG. Conditions for DFCO to engage. Engine RPM above about 1,200 to 1,500. Throttle completely closed. Speed above 15 to 20 miles per hour. Engine warmed up. AC compressor doesn't block it. The fan and blend doors keep working, but the compressor cycles off. All of these are met in the standard coming up to a red light, foot off gas situation. Getting the most out of it. Read the road ahead. See a red light or a stopped queue 300 yards out. Lift off now, not in 100 yards, not in 50. Now. The car coasts toward the light, decelerating on engine compression and aero drag, and you're burning zero fuel on that whole stretch. Common mistake, bearing down on the throttle right up to 50 feet from the light, then hard braking. Fuel is being burned until the last second. Brake pads are heating up unnecessarily. One more nuance on the OEM side. Not every car handles DFCO identically. On most Toyota, Honda, and Ford 4-cylinders, from about 2005 onward, DFCO cuts fuel completely and cleanly, and the instantaneous MPG display on the dashboard will show 99.9 or DOT during coast. On some BMW and Mercedes 6-cylinder cars, the ECU uses a lower cutoff threshold. DFCO engages at higher RPMs and disengages sooner, so the effective window is smaller. On some CVT-equipped cars, including my Civic, DFCO does its full cut, but the transmission also lowers ratio during coast, which reduces the RPM you're coasting at and shortens the DFCO window. Still net positive, but the effect is a couple percent smaller than on a stick shift or a traditional automatic. Realistic savings: 5 to 15% in urban driving with lots of stop and go where there's frequent throttle off. One of the strongest techniques on the list. Plus, brake pads last roughly twice as long because a chunk of the deceleration is being done by the engine. Separate note on manuals. On a manual, don't coast in neutral. A lot of people do this thinking, in neutral, engine sips less fuel. Backwards. In neutral, the engine burns fuel to keep idling, roughly 0.2 to 0.25 gallons per hour. In gear, with the throttle off, DFCO gives you 0. Difference is about a quarter gallon per hour. Keep it in gear until RPM drops to 1,500, then declutch or drop to neutral. Hybrids do something different. Toyota's hybrids, the Prius, Camry hybrid, RAV4 hybrid, and most current plug-in hybrids use regenerative braking. Lift off throttle and the internal combustion engine simply shuts off. The electric motor decelerates the car and dumps kinetic energy back into the battery as electricity. DFCO is basically replaced by regen. Small distinction. On a gas-only car, you're throwing away the kinetic energy of the car as brake heat when you finally have to press the pedal. On a hybrid, you're recovering it into the battery. That's why hybrids always beat conventional in the city. They literally don't burn the momentum away as brake pad heat. On a gasoline car, the best you can do is stretch DFCO as long as possible. Every time you lift 50 feet earlier and coast those 50 feet at 0 fuel flow, you've moved closer to hybrid efficiency on that stretch. Habit number 1. Read the road 15 seconds ahead. Not a technical habit, a mindset. And it's the foundation for all 6 of the others. All 6 of the previous habits ultimately require one thing: the ability to see the situation before it's on top of you. Lifting off 300 yards before a red light means noticing the light before you're in the panic braking zone. Cruising at 60 in traffic that's doing 70 means deciding your speed independently of what everyone else does. Confident acceleration means seeing clear road ahead early enough. Practically. The driver's eyes shouldn't stop at the bumper of the car in front. They go through it, forward, to where the flow of traffic will be in 10 to 15 seconds. At 40 miles per hour, that's about 900 feet ahead. At 60 miles per hour, 1,300. At 75, 1,600. You're looking at the traffic light that's about to turn yellow or red. At the vehicle 2 lanes over that's clearly about to merge into your lane in a few seconds. At the traffic backup building at the next intersection. What this gives you: prediction. Prediction gives you time to react smoothly instead of abruptly. Smooth means no abrupt gas or brake. No abrupt pedals means no energy lost to brake heat and no fuel required to rebuild speed. Every brake application is throwing kinetic energy away as heat in the pads. Every subsequent acceleration rebuilds it from gasoline. A smooth driver who saw the situation 15 seconds ago doesn't brake and doesn't accelerate. He just maintains flow and burns minimum. The hypermiler community, the folks who obsess over MPG on Priuses and Insights, has documented that this single habit, forward anticipation, contributes 10 to 20% of their total savings, more than any single technical habit. My buddy in Columbus reckons that alone accounts for a full 2 to 3 miles per gallon of the difference between his numbers and mine in my first months of trying. How to train it? Easy. Every time you brake, ask yourself, could I have seen this situation coming 10 seconds ago? 20 seconds ago? A month or 2 of asking that consistently, and you start seeing traffic lights a full block ahead and syncing your speed to their cycle. That's basically a driving sport at that point. And paradoxically, it saves even more fuel because you don't sit at as many red lights. The 30-day experiment. How to measure this on your car. One more thing before we close out. None of my numbers actually matter to you until you've measured your own before and after. Simple protocol you can start tonight. Step 1. Fill up to a full tank. Write down 3 numbers, odometer reading, gallons pumped, from the receipt, and today's date. Drive the way you've been driving for 2 weeks. Change nothing about your habits. Step 2. 2 weeks later, fill up to full again. Write down new numbers. Do the math. Miles driven divided by gallons used equals your baseline MPG. Step 3. Apply the 7 habits for 30 days. First few days will feel awkward. Your reflexes won't shift instantly. By the end of week 1, the smoother driving becomes automatic. By week 3, it's the new normal. By week 4, you'll forget how you drove before. Step 4. At the 30-day mark, fill up again. Do the math again. Difference between baseline and 30-day number is your honest improvement. Typical results: 12 to 20% MPG gain from the 7 habits. Very attentive drivers hit 25%. If your gain is under 5%, you are already close to optimum, and that's useful to know too. One note on methodology. Ideal case, both measurements are in similar conditions. Similar mix of city and highway, similar time of year, similar outside temperatures. If baseline was July with AC running constantly and follow-up was October with AC off, you can't fairly compare. Plan both measurements in the same seasonal window and you'll be comparing habit change to habit change, not weather. Most important part. Comment below. What's your current MPG? Which of the 7 do you already do without thinking? And which do you always skip? And if you decide to run the 30-day experiment, post your baseline number and come back in a month with your after number. Those measurements are the most valuable material I get for future videos. If this was useful, like, subscribe, notifications on. I put out a few of these a week. Tools, fuel, diagnostics, and honest DIY, without the heroics. Thanks for watching to the end, and good luck with the experiment. It really works.